On this week's episode, we were talking about Guenther Steiner leaving Haas, new name for Sauber, and some red flag rule changes that are going to be taking effect in the lower formulas this season. Let's go. I'm forgetting that I need to do the next bit.
The floor is yours, Tom.
It's because Chris said he was going to do the news, and I was thinking, Chris is going to do this bit. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the year for Back of the Grid. Can you tell it's been a while that we've been away? I'm feeling it. I'm feeling rusty. How about you two? Are you feeling rusty? Well rested, but rusty.
Rusty and dusty. Currently. Rusty and dusty and jet lagged, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've got things to talk about. Like, this time of year can usually be pretty quiet, but I think we have enough to be able to start making our way into the year. Some interesting changes within teams, both from structures and names and so on. And as I alluded to before, we've got some interesting red flag rule changes that might actually creep their way into F1 from F2 and F3. So I'm going to let Chris go through all the specifics, but yeah.
Do we have any metaphorical red flags in there, or are these just specific red flags?
I mean,
to sporting code.
There's a few red flags at Haas.
We've not got that far yet. It could just be red flags against new rules, to be fair, knowing the FIA. So yeah, we'll get that.
We'll start with Haas. I guess Gene Haas decided it had enough of a break over Christmas and just dropped some news a few days into the new year. So Guenther Steiner out at Haas after 8 years with the team with immediate effect. They've replaced him with Ao Katsumu. He was previously director of engineering at the team. If you don't recognise the name, you'll definitely recognise his face from having been on the Haas pit wall for, I think he's been there alongside Guenther Steiner from the beginning of Haas existing as a team. He was with Renault and BAR before. It sort of sounds like they're kind of trying to do a bit of what McLaren have done, in that they've said him as a team principal is going to have engineering fundamentally at the heart of the management, and then they're going to employ a separate COO to kind of oversee all of the non-sporting stuff. But yeah, I guess we'll start with Guenther Steiner. Gene has basically said it was a performance decision. They've been in the sport 8 years now, still yet to have a podium. They've finished in the bottom couple of places for like 3 years in a row now. He was like, I don't blame Guenther Steiner for this necessarily, but also the performance isn't good enough and it's time for a change, which sounds a lot like blaming him for it.
I think I think it's fair enough. I think, like, as much as we all love Guenther Steiner, he's kind of got a point. It probably is time for some new ideas, I think. Mm-hmm. I think any team principal that's in Formula One for that amount of time and consistently gets sort of, average to not great results is on thin ice, aren't they? So I'm not surprised to see. I'm amazed it hasn't happened sooner, to be honest. That they've put a lot of faith into him. I think he's one of those guys who's they've kept sort of getting the odd surprise good result, and I think there's been one of those every time. Probably there's been a bit of doubt over his head, and it's probably saved his skin a few times. And now they're just, even though there were one or two sort of interesting results for Haas last year, something had to give at some point, and I think finally it's happened. They've got to try something different.
Yeah, hopefully it's not a case of he was the only thing keeping them together to get them results.
That's the thing, isn't it?
That's the only risk you run, isn't it? Like,
concern.
Yeah, but
I did read sort of what was probably kind of the final straw for Gene Haas was that last season, when the results weren't coming, he basically put his hand in his pocket to pay for a new upgrade package, like up to $8 million I've seen reported of his own money he put in. And that upgrade package just basically didn't help in the slightest. And I think that was maybe kind of the point where it was like, this isn't working, something needs to change. It's a difficult one with Haas, because I think a lot of that team's problems lie more with the guy that owns the team than the guy that's running the team. But I mean, Gene Haas is an interesting guy for a lot of reasons. But as you say, Stu, like ultimately, Guenther Steiner was the one running that team day to day. Whatever was being done at that team clearly wasn't working. So something had to change. And whether it was ultimately his fault or not, when you're in that position, the buck stops with you. So
yeah, it was quite sudden, wasn't it?
It felt it, definitely.
Because I don't remember there being any rumours about this.
No.
Other than about 2 hours before it was actually announced, which basically meant all the press knew and they had an embargo.
Yeah.
I didn't even. Well, I mean, that's usually the case anyway in Formula One. Like, there's always massive embargoes for upwards until someone secretly speaks to someone 2 hours later, and then they have to release the information early, it happens every single time anything happens, which makes life really, really difficult for the social media teams who are frantically preparing press releases and goodness knows what else to make these announcements. But anyway, Haas. For me, you worry where Haas. You now worry where they're going to end up this season. Like, are they going to just get worse and worse and worse and worse? Is this going to affect their how badly is this going to affect their season so soon before the 2024 season starts? It feels like an odd time to make that change. Like, normally, I guess if you wanted to change your team principle, like, you'd be looking at sort of Abu Dhabi end of a season. You'd be like, okay, we're done now. We'll get the new person into thing. And you know, in normal circumstances, you'd be planning far enough ahead that you'd have someone lined up probably mid-season to be overseeing the next car and preparations for the next season. So this is for me. This is very, very, very sudden.
I suppose it depends on if the COO person, they already know who that is and they are now just putting things in place, because it could well be that it's been on the cards from Gene Haas's side of things for a little while, and he's been maybe putting the replacement structure in place before making the move.
It's possible, but I think Wood would have got out.
I think it goes some way to explaining why they decided to promote from within rather than bring an outsider in. Because, I mean, you've got Mattia Binotto, Otmar Safnauer, Jos Capito. They're all out there, like, on the market, but they opted to promote from within, which, maybe, you know, we've got a few months before the season starts. Let's not try and get someone up to speed. Let's just get someone who's already been working on next year's car.
Yeah, and also not only that, but you know, all those names you just mentioned, kind of what really did they do at their respective teams anyway? Like, yes, Matteo Binotto had a decent sort of start to 2022, but other than that, like, you know, is he just going to bring all the problems that they had at Ferrari to Haas if he does that? Mm-hmm. Matteo Binotto, to be fair, Matteo Binotto might have been an okay fit because of the relationship Haas have with Ferrari. But at the same time, maybe that makes him not a great fit because all of the animosity between probably Matteo Binotto and Ferrari having left that team, why is he going to step back into the Ferrari fire? You know, why is he going to put himself in the firing line, even though it's not directly Ferrari? There's still that connection, and you probably want a clean break if you're Matteo Binotto.
Mm-hmm. I'm quite excited to see what this new guy, Ao Komatsu, can do. Like, he's one of those guys that's been around in F1 for years and years, and he's never really been that much in the public eye. So I'm hoping with this CRO they're bringing in, that can kind of leave him to just kind of be good at running the team rather than worrying about being the face of the team, because you see so many team principals who kind of have to do both of those jobs, and it feels like gradually teams are moving away from that structure, or a lot of them are. Obviously, you've still got your Toto Wolffs and Christian Horners of this world are always going to want to have their mug in front of the camera.
Well, I mean, like look at McLaren to an extent. Like they try and structure it so that the team are getting on with the team, and the public face is like the only, I guess, parts of the day-to-day team is the drivers that become part of the public face, but that's kind of expected of everyone on the grid, isn't it? Like, but I mean,
sort of
from
separation of church and state in a way,
kind of, yeah. So yeah, it might help things, like you say, to have somebody else that just comes and deals with that and being the public face, and let AO just get on with building a car with the development team and, you know, race strategy and all that stuff that comes with it being a team principal.
I think that's the way it's sort of start. It looks like that's the way it's going for a lot of Formula E. That's how you run a Formula One team these days. Like having one person at the very top, unless you've got, you know, an endless budget, which, I mean, these days none of them have endless budgets, but they still, you know, they're still spending, even though there's a budget cap in place. You know, there's two teams at the very top there that are spending an awful lot more money than any other team. However you cut it, you know, they're only financially restricted in certain areas, and wherever else they can spend money, I'm sure there's an advantage to spending money. Includes Ferrari probably as well, definitely Ferrari as well. But yeah, I think seeing the way like some of the more recent restructures of teams have gone, definitely there are big gains to have from having more focused, specialized teams at the top who get on well, than there are maybe, you know, when you look at a team like Haas, who've had that one guy at the top and they've just never managed to get it together. It does make you think, well, maybe, you know, running a Formula One team is just too much for one person these days, especially the smaller teams where I imagine there's a lot more plates to spin for that one person than there would be, say, your Red Bulls and your Ferraris. You'll have your own team underneath you and you're the face of that team. But they're probably set up in a similar way. They probably have all these different bods underneath, you know, your top dog who have been known for years, really, really well trusted, and are obviously really, really good at their jobs and are making things work for those top teams.
Yeah. Which I think is where it didn't work with Mattia Binotto, because he was essentially trying to be all the things at Ferrari.
Yeah.
And just kind of doesn't work these days.
Or Toto Wolff.
But even Toto Wolff, he's got a lot of people around him that take on a lot of the other stuff. Like, he doesn't try to be the technical lead. Like,
and you can see that. Well, I mean, he's often not sat on the pit wall, isn't he? He's often in the
exactly.
garage.
Yeah,
and sort of towards the back of the garage, and you can see when the cameras are on him, like they've got to sort of weave the shot through like a million people to get to that shot of Toto Wolff banging his fist on the desk. So.
Yeah, I think him and Christian Horner, although Christian Horner does sit on the pit wall, they are both very good at knowing where they are the best people and knowing where they've got better people around them to lean on. I think that's what makes them both such successful team principals.
To be fair, in those kind of teams, that is what makes a good team principal, isn't it?
Yeah.
In reality.
Yeah, totally.
Like, you're there to actually, probably in the grand scheme of things, input very little. You're there to hold all the other members of the team accountable for what they're responsible for, to make sure that the team delivers. I think that's almost the traditional successful team principal model, I think, is not trying to run a department or the whole team, but holding people that can run departments and teams accountable for what they're doing and keeping all the parts moving and pushing in the right direction. And I think, Horner and Wolff are probably good examples of, and they then again become that public face. They're the ones that go speak to the media. They take the good and the bad from the media, but it shields those that are running the development team, running the engineering team, whatever. They can just get on with it.
Yeah, they can just do their job. They're not under pressure from the media. They'll soak up all of that pressure. Ideally, should soak up all that pressure, and then it allows the guys who just focused on trackside operations, on designing new parts, on this, that, and the other, to really just focus on that job and block everything else out.
A crazy thing I read the other day around all this: Mike Crack is now the third longest serving team principal on the grid.
Wow.
Because he's been there 2 years. Every other team in the last 2 years has changed their team principal now.
Wow.
Other than Christian Horner, Toto Wolff, and Mike Crack. It's ridiculous.
That's insane.
It's like the driver market has been completely stagnant and the team principal market has just gone wild.
Yeah.
What alternate universe is this?
Yeah. Last thing on this before we move on, any thoughts on where Guenther Steiner might pop up next?
World Endurance Championship is the usual go-to, isn't it? That's
I feel like WEC or IMSA, maybe IndyCar.
Yeah.
I would like to see Binotto and Steiner, the movie, where they just put them in a small little car in Italy, driving around, eating good food, and just film it for 2 hours.
Have you seen
2 hours of content out on it?
Have you seen Amanda and Alan's Italian job on BBC iPlayer?
I have not.
No.
So Amanda Holden, who, if you're not in the UK, it's a sort of a celeb kind of. I don't even know what kind of celeb you'd call Amanda Holden. She's kind of like on a lot of the talent shows and all that.
Yeah, she's like a presenter really, and judge, isn't she? A celebrity judge.
Yeah, and Alan Carr is a comedian, a very good comedian, very funny comedian.
Oh, I can't disagree.
And they buy a house for £1 in Italy. And they do it up, and it's a whole show about them doing up a house. And then obviously so it'll be them doing a bit of DIY, and then their guy comes and finishes the job, and then they'll go off and they'll be on a boat drinking a bit of wine or whatever, doing something, and it's just really good.
So you want this for
yeah.
Guenther Steiner,
Guenther Steiner and Matteo Binotto.
Doing that,
the Formula One equivalent of that would be,
or just like just
great.
touring vineyards or something. I'd watch that.
Yeah, they've done that. They did that. Sky did that with them. I think.
Well, this is the thing. It's the stuff from Drive to Survive that makes me want that. When they were messing around, it was the start of Drive to Survive last season. I think
a little tiny Fiat 500.
Yeah,
those cars, man. Like I borrowed one of those off someone for over Christmas, and they're the best. They are so good. I've been looking at them. Like the Abarth 500 is mental. You get like
the Abarth is great.
You can get the 180 horsepower version. It's just an absolute demon.
The 595 one, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And you can get them tuned. Like you can buy the base one and get it tuned to like 170 as well. So
can you tell it's been a slightly quiet winter period so far?
I mean, so far my tangents have included random cars and TV shows. Yeah.
Semi-celebrity type people doing stuff in Italy, and then Stu's experience of a Fiat 500.
You should definitely watch Amanda and Alan's. Is it Alan and Amanda? Amanda and Alan's Italian Job on BBC iPlayer. Every episode on there is brilliant. Right, let's get on.
Back of the Grid are no way affiliated by or in sponsorship with the BBC, just for the record.
Although if they're interested, get in touch. We now know what Sauber is going to be called for the next 2 years. Obviously, Audi's taken them over in 2026. For the next 2 years, they are going to be called Stake F1 Team.
Oh, I love Stake.
That's the other spelling of steak, unfortunately.
That's not quite right, according to what I've seen. Have you seen the full version of the name?
Oh, I mean, I dread to think what the full version
is. So I can't make it make sense. It's Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber. Serious.
Yeah.
I don't know where kicks
they
come
did that, but
from.
then they rename it after that. They renamed so that was the original, and then they've simplified it to just Stake.
Yeah, they've sort of shortened it now.
Okay.
So that's Stake are a gambling website that came on as a sponsor for them last year, and then Kick is a Twitch rival that's that's linked to Stake. Yeah, because there are some questions about when they're racing certain companies where gambling advertising is banned, and the name of the team is now a gambling company. So that's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, maybe they just put an E and an A in the right places. And do it that way. I mean, that's not a terrible way of doing it.
Meat-themed helmet.
Yeah. You could just have a meat-themed Formula One car, like the Lady Gaga reference where she's just dressed in pork or whatever it was.
Yeah.
You just put like bits of bacon all over
the livery is just like different kinds of meats.
Yeah. It could be like streaks of bacon going across the car, a bit like the Mercedes lines going across it. Actually look decent.
I mean, there's no livery yet, so...
Well, the most interesting part of this is that Stake and Kick's colour scheme is like black and a sort of neon green, and they are sort of seem to be teasing that that's the direction the livery is going to go down as well, which could be... It could be cool, but we're coming off the back of the Alfa Romeo red and white liveries, which were some of the best liveries in years. So whatever they do, I'm going to miss the nice Alfa Romeo liveries. But
yeah, I've been doing my portfolio site today, and it's all black and green, which is
There you go.
bold.
black and green is in.
I don't know if I'm keeping it. I don't know if I'm going to keep those colours, but at the moment they're black and green.
Right, some stuff with a bit more actual substance. So F2 and F3, but not F1, are changing their rules in a similar way to other series like IndyCar have currently got. So this relates to red flags in qualifying. The new rule says that any driver who, in the opinion of the stewards, is the sole cause of the issuance of a red flag during qualifying will not be permitted to take any further part in the session, and their fastest lap time during the session may be deleted.
They've convoluted that rule, haven't they?
They have
Yeah, it started out so well. It was anyone who is the sole cause of an incident will not be permitted to take further part, which they're probably not going to be able to anyway, because they've probably wrecked their car into a wall. So they're not going to be able to do that anyways. But then they're like, but then they may have that. Just say yes or no. They either will or they won't.
Well, yeah, there's that. So they've introduced, it's classic, isn't it? Grey areas all over the place. So their fastest lap time during the session may be deleted. So if you accidentally, I don't know, say chop someone and you chop them a bit too soon, you take the front suspension off and your car somehow survives, but they go into a wall and and you've caused that red flag by causing an incident yourself, then you as the person causing the incident may get your lap time deleted. And if only in the opinion of the stewards, so no one else's opinion, it's just in the opinion of the stewards. I mean, you don't need that line, but in the opinion of the stewards, you cause the issue of that red flag, then you're done in qualifying. Essentially, you're disqualified. It's basically you're disqualified.
Yeah.
I guess because you keep your second fastest lap time.
Yeah.
If you were disqualified, you'd lose all your lap time. So it's a sort of light disqualification.
Okay, so that's weird, isn't it? Because like there's an argument to say that if you cause someone to crash out of qualifying, you deserve to be disqualified yourself.
I'd have thought that'd be investigated as an actual incident as well, though. I think this is more like framing situations where people are, I don't know, like
crash yourself. Maybe it's Monaco and you lock up and then you end up in the barrier.
Monaco is the most obvious example, like Rosberg accidentally going down the escape road, or when Leclerc was fastest a few years ago and then crashed in qualifying and no one else could complete a lap to beat him. In that situation, Leclerc would have had his fastest lap time deleted as a penalty and he actually wouldn't have kept the pole position.
But what if his second fastest lap was also very, very fast and could potentially have him on pole?
Good for him, I guess.
Well, exactly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then surely you should just go don't go halfway, just go the whole hog. If you cause a red flag,
you should be your times from that session, shouldn't it, basically?
Yeah, your times from that session should be deleted.
Like all of them.
Or a grid penalty, yeah, maybe.
All of this is probably why they are doing this in F2 and F3 first, to kind of
and fair play to them.
Problems.
Yeah,
the
that's
fact that it's not in F1 yet, and they're testing it out and giving it.
That's a better.
It seems like they're giving
approach.
it some due diligence.
Yeah. So rather than the knee jerk. Oh, we need to change this thing. Let's just implement it into F1 immediately from the next race. Like they have been known to. This is a better approach. I still don't think the way the rule is written is. I mean, that is not, technically speaking, that is pretty much not a change, because in my eyes, the vast majority of causing sole responsibility of causing a red flag during a qualifying session, I'm struggling to think of a red flag caused solely by one person that is not them crashing into a barrier and being out of qualifying anyway. So the first bit of that is almost redundant.
The only one I can think of is Zandvoort last year. I think it was one of the Williams went off and the stewards were really trigger happy and called a red flag. And then they just pulled back on the track and drove back to the pits because they hadn't actually crashed. I think they basically spun off and they were in a sort of dangerous place. but they got the car.
But I bet,
again. But
Well,
I bet
again, like-
that's one of the ones where that'll end up becoming part of a grey area, won't it? Where they'll not do anything about that because they'll be like, well, that was us. We actually called that a bit prematurely. That's not the driver's fault. But by that letter of the law, the way they've written it, they should disqualify them from not allow them to continue.
But that's the safety net, then, isn't it? The safety net is that the opinion of the stewards is the sole cause of. So an additional cause would be, we were trigger happy, we called the flag.
I guess so. Yeah,
you can continue.
That does involve them assuming responsibility, though.
Okay, that does kind of. It does. That's true. But I mean, you'd think that they would have the sort of ability to do that. Okay, so in that case, I can accept that opinion of the stewards is required in the writing of this rule, right? But I think their fastest lap during the session may be deleted. Is again, they're trying to give themselves wiggle room, but they've already got. I think there's already enough wiggle room there in the opinion of the stewards is the sole cause.
Yeah.
So I think you need to be more sort of firm and solid with that part of the rule.
If you are probably deemed the sole reason for a red flag like that, and you've already set a time, then you probably should have a repercussion of that time not being valid anymore. I think the good examples are things like the Leclerc one in Monaco. It's all well and good that he's got a fast lap time, but he's then had an incident, as he would say, into a barrier that's then stopped a good five drivers maybe competing with him for that. And I think that's a good candidate to say that it should just automatically delete the bit that's like the grey area up for debate, flexibility, however you want to put it, should be in the opinion of the stewards. Are you the
of
something that is disadvantaging others?
If
and
so, these are the consequences.
If they feel so, you do not get to compete any further in the session if you were able to, because the car's not damaged enough to, not so damaged that you'd be out through those means, and the fastest lap you'd set up to that point is also deleted.
Yeah,
I think you would
not maybe deleted.
I think, and the up for debate questionable bit is just the stewards have to make the decision of you are solely responsible for hindering other people by causing a red flag.
Because IndyCar have had it like that for a while now, where if you cause a red flag, you lose your fastest lap time, black and white. And it's weird that they've not. I mean, it's weird, but also not surprising that F1 have had to muddy the waters so much.
Exactly.
In principle, what they're trying to do with this, I don't really have an issue with. I think,
I agree.
Something to sort of police that or penalise that, I think, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yes, but the way they've written it is very weak.
Yes,
as per standard.
Okay.
I'd be interested to see how it plays out in F2 and F3. Let's put it that way. Are we eagerly watching for red flags and seeing what they're doing?
You know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to have nothing's going to happen. There won't be a red flag in qualifying, and then they'll bring it into Formula One, and then they'll be trying it out on the fly, and then it'll happen, and then there'll be a big hoo ha. Why didn't Max Verstappen get his lap time deleted when Lewis Hamilton was just about to do his lap? It's going to come to that, guaranteed. Guarantee. I will say right now, on this day, 15th of January 2024, write this down, because in 2020, well, probably 2026, by the time Mercedes have caught up, that will happen at Monaco. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even have to be specifically them drivers. Is it? It's going to happen, no doubt.
No, specifically those two drivers.
It's going to be Charles. He's done it twice now already at Monaco.
He's not making 2026 predictions before we've even got through 2020.
Before we've even started 2024 yet. Okay, next bit.
Couple of news bits that are essentially just bullet points, but they're worthy of note, I guess. Toto Wolff has extended his contract with Mercedes until 2026 now. So he's sticking around for a few more years. I would say that maybe gives a clue as to the sort of contract extension Lewis Hamilton's probably going to sign as well. I feel like they're maybe both going to stick around into the new rules in 2026, see how things look, and then sort of take things from there, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. I think,
Do you think
when you've been in the game as long as those two as well, I think it's probably, especially Hamilton, that you probably big rule change coming up. He's still going to want to be driving those cars. Are they going to live up to the expectation of the new rules? You know, you want to give yourself a little bit of a get out if you don't like the way things are going to look.
Do you think
we'll see a few retirements at the end of 2026?
It's possible, definitely possible. Go on, Tom.
Yeah. And I was going to say, do you think as a part owner of that team, he has to handle his own contract negotiations with himself?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, he only has a third of it, doesn't he? So
yeah.
He's still got to float it past Mercedes and Ineos, I guess, but I can just imagine that way. He's like arguing for and against himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what like performance sort of parameters are in his contract, if there's any clauses in there that if he doesn't perform, then he's got to make way for someone else or anything.
Yeah,
but then team owner Toto has put some like weird little loopholes that team principal Toto can jump through to save his job.
Maybe, probably.
Williams have extended their Mercedes power unit contract until 2030. Makes sense for them, I think. 6 years is a big jump. It's going to be a shame if the Mercedes power unit with the new rules in 2026 is absolute garbage, but there's always ways out of these contracts, I guess.
Yeah.
And then the most important bit of news that we've all been waiting for is Jenson Button News Corner, because we always like a bit of Jenson Button news on this podcast. He's going to be entering the World Endurance Championship full-time this year, which is really cool. He's driving for Team Jota, which are running one of the Porsche 963 hypercars. After having a taste of Le Mans last year, he's doing the full season, which is extremely cool. I'm really excited. I'm so excited for World Endurance Championship this year.
The Porsche is going to be a lot different from what he was driving last year.
Well, yeah.
Yes. He's also doing the Daytona 24, which is pretty soon, I think, isn't it? It's normally end of
next couple of weeks.
Yeah. He's driving that for Andretti. And an interesting tidbit, because IMSA and WEC use the same rule set for their top class now, the LMDH class. Jenson Button is now going to be the first driver to compete in a race in two different LMDH cars. Everyone else so far has only ever driven one of them, but he's driving an Acura in IMSA and then he's driving a Porsche in WEC, which is a little interesting tidbit.
Le Mans Daytona hybrid for the unversed
hypercar.
Is it hypercar?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is, isn't it? Sorry, Le Mans Daytona hypercar, and then there's another, and the hypercars don't necessarily have to be hybrid, right? Oh no, we need to. I'm just going to move on.
Yeah,
that's
a kind of word.
Yeah.
That's all the newsy bits. I am going to drag us kicking and screaming very briefly back to 2023. There's one thing we forgot to do, which is, ordinarily I'd have let this fly, but this is one of my favourite things we do, and we forgot about it. So I'm going to quickly do this now, which is about this time last year, or actually no, it might have been just after pre-season testing last year. We did our season predictions of increasing wildness. Yeah, starting with something we thought might happen and getting wilder from there.
So
so I've dug them back out to see how we did.
Oh God,
not very well is the answer. Who should we do first?
Or do them by the category if you want. Do all three by the category.
However they're written is probably easiest.
It's easiest to do all of one person, so I'll just start with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your first one was there'll be less than 3/10 between the top three teams in Bahrain.
Who? Tom or me?
No,
you.
Oh, me.
That was yours.
That's a shame.
You weren't far off. Obviously, Red Bull, Ferrari, and Aston Martin were the top three teams. The quali gap for Verstappen to Alonso was 6/10. Perez to Alonso was 5/10, and you said 3/10. So you weren't far off, but not quite that small. You said Mercedes will win the first race. They came 6th and 7th. You said Alonso will win more than one race. He did not.
These are in increasing levels of wildness, though. We should.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. So we don't actually believe that any of these things are going to happen, other than maybe the first one.
You'll see how wild they get. You said Aston Martin will be in the hunt for the constructors' title in the final race of the season.
That was wishful thinking.
First third of the season, that looked like it might have been possible, but And then finally, you said Nick de Vries will outscore and replace Perez by mid-season.
Well, that was
That's the best
that was
one.
the ultimate wild one, wasn't it?
Yes. Mine was next. I said there'll be no new race winners or pole sitters. That depends if we count
Not
sprint
true,
races.
'cause sprint
if
races,
we
had
count
Piastri.
sprint races, Piastri ruined that for me. Grand Prix, I was right, but sprint races, I wasn't.
That's fine. That's fine. That's not.
That's a
terrible
half
prediction.
point. I'll give you a half point
Alright.
for that.
I said one of the championships will be won at a sprint race, which did happen. Verstappen won his title in Qatar sprint.
Brilliant.
Logan Sargent will score more points than Alex Albon.
That was way off. Yeah, way off.
Haas will get a podium, but it won't be Hulkenberg.
Nope.
Big fat nope. And I said a current IndyCar driver will be announced as an F1 driver for 2024.
No.
Big fat nope.
1.5 points. That's not too bad.
Tom, you said Mercedes will win by the halfway point of the season.
Nope.
They didn't win at all. You said there would be 6 drivers on the podium before Monaco. There were only 5. There were 5 before Monaco, and then Ocon made it 6 in Monaco. So
Can I have a
you
half
just
point?
missed
Come
that
on.
one. You said a new or returning driver will outscore their teammate, which Hulkenberg outscored Magnussen, so you get that one. You said there'll be 4 drivers in contention for the title in Abu Dhabi.
Which title?
I mean, it doesn't matter. And then finally, you said Nick de Vries will win a race.
Oh, yeah, that was a wild one. Can I have 1.5 from a Monaco thing, or does that not count? Or do I
If
just have
you
to
give
go
me
1?
half for the no race winners or pole sitters, I'll give you a half for your Monaco.
Yeah.
Well, can I have a half point for my opening qualifying prediction then?
You can, but it still means you only got half a point.
It's better than no point. Half a point is better
It is
than
better
no
than
points.
no point.
True motorsport
it. I
people
just want-
fighting for any last morsel we can get.
exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we're idiots.
got some launch
If
dates.
people haven't tuned out by now, then there's something wrong.
Well, we've got some launch dates, so we know we have some content next month. We've got Stake, which I now already hate saying as an F1 team name, 5th of Feb, Williams 5th of Feb, Alpine 7th of Feb, Aston Martin 12th, Ferrari 13th, Mercedes 14th, Red Bull 15th. So that'll be a busy couple of weeks. McLaren, Haas, and whatever Alpha Tauri, Toro Rosso are going to be called is still TBC. There's been some
McLaren,
things.
Red Bull and Haas, right? You'd think?
Huh?
You'd think they're going to be called...
No.
No, I mean Alpha Tauri.
Oh,
they're
the
changing
second
their name.
Red Bull, sorry.
Yeah,
Alpha
the
Tauri,
second Red Bull
yeah.
team.
Oh, they're just called Team RB at the moment, aren't they? I mean,
Yeah.
this is a whole thing. Like, do you want to get into this? Like this kind of like
we can,
those
yeah,
two teams
it's-
like getting ever closer together, sharing factories and things. Like, if I'm a team principal for McLaren or for Ferrari or for Aston Martin, I'm going to be like,
That's going
what
to
the
blow
hell,
up this
man?
year.
Like, you can't just like make your other team like the same team.
Except they can.
Well, yeah, looks like they can. I suppose. I mean, on paper, they can't. Can they? Can they?
Yeah, I don't.
It's such a sort of weird situation. I think for me, like, there has to be at least a separation of premises. You can't have, your second team coming and joining your first team.
Yeah, I mean, they've either found a very good loophole in the component sharing and selling rules, because you'd have, I mean, this is the FIA we're talking about, so probably not, but you'd have thought that there'd be a lot of stuff in that particular section about not being able to sell certain parts and components and make them on behalf of other teams that would prevent them from sharing a factory, thus meaning that they can't do that, where
I mean, all it does is double the resources of Red Bull, though, doesn't it? That's the point. Like, the only reason that Red Bull are going to be keen to do, or any team would be keen to sort of bring in a smaller team into the same building, would surely mean that you'd have double the budget, double the thing. The only difference is you're making 4 cars, but you've got at least double the wind tunnel time, at least double the budget, at least double of everything. If they're just going to pull everything into that top car and then sell it down to the bottom one.
they've essentially found the biggest budget cap loophole to date.
Yeah,
which is
like,
absorb another team.
Like to me. And especially given that like they're the one team that grossly went over the budget cap as well, depending on your sort of perspective of how much, whether it's like $1 million or 7 million or whatever it was. What was it now? Can you remember how much it was?
I mean, it ended up being
I think in the end, once
hundreds of
the numbers,
thousands,
it was like
maybe
$1.5 million or something.
Oh,
Well, I think it started at something like 10 million, and then they sort of weirdly somehow managed to wrangle it down to one using
I think
clever wording.
Some elements of that was reporting,
right?
to be fair, but yeah, like it's. I mean,
10 million.
Herein lies the problem. The FIA, we've already discussed it once. The FIA need to write the flipping rules better. Like,
well, I think they just need to be switched on to when, stuff like, why allow them to?
I mean, who's sanctioned in the first place?
Step in and say, no, you can't share a factory.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Because obviously within the rules, there is a list of parts that teams are allowed to buy from another team. And that's fine. Like, that exists. They all sign off those rules. It's mad that AlphaTauri haven't been doing that more until now, to be honest.
It's suspect that they haven't. It's super sus that they've waited until a budget cap comes in and development tokens and wind tunnel restrictions, all this. Now they do it, but they never did it before when none of that was a factor.
But the trouble now is what you can't police is people in a factory talking to each other or someone leaving a printout lying around. Like,
exactly.
Or as you say, like someone from the Red Bull side being like, oh, could you sort of mock up a part that looks a bit like this and stick that on your wind tunnel?
Exactly.
So, and the FIA have finally said that they're this year going to start making their factory inspections random rather than pre-warning the teams, which is already mad that was a thing. But I just don't see how this can be policed properly, and I think this is going to blow up massively this year.
It's going to hugely blow up in people's faces because there's not a team down the grid that's not going to be cheesed off about it, because you've got people who are competing with Alpine further down the grid. Sorry, with AlphaTauri or whatever they're going to end up being called further down the grid, say from sort of 6th, 7th, 8th down, and then you've got your top teams who are going to be kicking off, your McLarens, let's say your Aston Martins, let's say your Mercedes and Ferrari is going to be upset with Red Bull for everything we've just described. So it's people are going to be up in arms, I think, at some point. Yeah. Once that AlphaTauri comes out and it looks identical to the Red Bull, and they're suddenly, way up the grid, and Red Bull are like suddenly 3 seconds ahead of everyone else because they've pooled their resources. I mean, they're cleverer than that. They'd never let it get to that big of an advantage. No. They'd be careful, I think, about how they implement it. But it's just so obviously wrong to anyone on the outside.
We saw how much of a drama it was a couple of years ago with the pink Mercedes, and that was just them copying parts based on photographs and footage, essentially.
Yeah.
If you think how much that blew up at the time, if AlphaTauri start having more success, this is going to be ridiculous. Because Haas are a weird example of this, because Haas literally have a corner of the factory floor in Maranello that is their stuff, and they buy every single part they're allowed to from Ferrari. And if you remember way back in Haas's very first season in F1, they turned up and were quite successful straight away. Yeah. And everyone was complaining about it. And then years later, when Haas were just crap, everyone just sort of lost interest. No one really cared what they were doing when when they weren't achieving anything. But you can guarantee if Haas suddenly start having some success again, people will start asking questions of that rule and what they're doing again. But
I think the same. I think exactly the same at the top end of the grid. If Red Bull, are eking out their advantage even further, sure, and they, if they have less wind tunnel time than anyone else, but they're still able to develop much, much more speed into their car than anyone else is, and they've got another team in the same factory as them, then that's pretty sus, all right? That's going to be pretty. People are going to be pretty sort of suspicious of what's going on there, I think. So at the top end of the grid, it's got absolutely huge potential to kick off as well. So
it's a minefield just waiting.
Can't wait to see it. Honestly, like that's going to be, if I'll make another prediction for the 2024 season this time rather than the 2026 season. This whole thing is going to kick off probably at least by Monaco. There's going to be accusations from one team or another about, or queries at the very least from one team or another about the setup of Alfa Tauri and of Red Bull together.
It's going to be the big story of this season, I think.
I think so, massively. Yeah. And Twitter's going to be a horrible place because of it as well, as though it isn't already. Twitter's going to be an even worse place.
Worse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should we finish up with a little bit of inbox?
Yeah. Should we have the jingle for the first time this year?
Let's do it.
Let's.
Keep it saying now. Stay out. Box. Hey, man.
Same old brilliant jingle for 2024. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, lads.
Exactly.
I'll take the first one then, shall I? Or
Go for
does
it.
someone else want it?
No, you go for it.
Okay. Cody B, I've got sort of two grouped together here. So Cody B says, does the general chaos and lackluster results at Haas give more weight to the Andretti Cadillac entry? Imagine Andretti being accepted and appointing Guenther as their team principal.
I was thinking along the same lines then as that question started getting read out.
And then Benson says, hey man, do you think Gene may finally step aside and sell his team to Andretti, or is that too easy of a solution to the American team question?
I mean, Gene Haas keeps on saying that he isn't in F1 to sell a team and make money. He's there to go racing. But if this new structure they come up with doesn't work, sooner or later he's going to lose interest, surely. You've got to imagine Andretti are kind of giving him a nudge, being like, got a team there. I see that you're losing interest in. Do you want to sell up a spot? Yeah, I mean, I think at this point the vast majority of people would rather have Andretti on the grid than Haas. I think that's a fair assumption to make.
I mean, I'd like them both, to be fair. But if you're gonna have to pick one, I do see some interest, but I think Andretti have probably again already got in mind what that team's going to look like if it comes to fruition.
Yeah,
I feel like they already know their plan for when the green light comes. But it would be really interesting to... Yeah, I mean, I do think it will happen at some point. It's just a case of when, but we'll see. But I'm not saying that Guenther wouldn't be part of that at all, but I think that it might not necessarily be a team principal role. Maybe, I don't know, part of a wider team, kind of like what McLaren did for a bit, where you had out-and-out team principal and you had...
Zach Brown is the sort of media voice for the team, quietly spinning the plates in the background. I guess.
So that's an Andretti in some capacity, and or someone appointed by them to do that, and then Gunther's in there maybe as part of team management or something.
Dude, for me, I'm kind of if you're a new team, bring some new ideas, bring some new people, and I know a lot of the logic in Formula One. I've read enough books about Formula One to know that it's a merry-go-round. People go around Formula One in different guises for different teams, but part of the fun of the experiment of having a new Formula One team surely should be bringing new people from outside of Formula One and bringing new ideas and maybe doing things differently from other teams and being good that way. Yes, the written law is that that's impossible, but until someone actually tries that, then
especially with companies like Andretti and Cadillac who have so much experience in other racing series, so to bring some of that external experience and knowledge in would be really cool.
And as well, given there's a budget cap now, I think that's a more reasonable approach There's an argument to say the opposite. There is an argument to say that it's even more important to bring in existing knowledge because there's less budget to go out and find the knowledge you need. But I do think between sort of a big enough group of people, you're always going to have some people who are always in Formula One anyway. Part of the problem, I think, in a lot of Formula One teams is, especially like teams like, Williams up until recently, has been, this is how we do it. It's Formula One. This is how we do things. If we do it different, then we're going to lose. So there's this big fear of like, in certain teams, there's a fear of doing things differently because that's just how they do them. And
Ferrari.
For a lot of teams,
Ferrari's
I think that holds them back.
Biggest example of that, I would say.
And I think if you look at McLaren, McLaren, a team who have recently got a lot of new personnel in and maybe some names that we haven't necessarily heard of ever before in Formula One. Zach Brown came from really... Where did Zach Brown even come from? Like he was like a corporate sort of dude, wasn't he? Like,
yeah, I mean, he was doing United Autosport stuff in various
he wasn't
series,
in Formula One.
No. In F1 terms, he was kind of unknown.
Yeah, and if you look at the journey that McLaren have been on, they've been from being a very successful Formula One team, doing things the way they've always done them because that's how they did them when they won championships. And now they're doing things a little bit differently. They've got quite a different sort of setup. They're probably one of the first teams to set up as a more of a broken up management structure, like we were talking about earlier. Then suddenly, this season they're having this last season
starting to pay dividends,
big success, starting to pay dividends, starting to work out for them. So maybe that is the way forward.
Anything else to add from anyone on that before I read the next one?
No.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Wes says, "Hey man, Red Bull have announced their 2024 car launch date today. Do I bother tuning in, or should I just watch last year's and say I did and say that I did? We all know the livery won't change.
Well,
the best bit of Red Bull liveries is the testing livery anyway. Like you might as well just wait until they show up at testing and see whatever that looks like."
I did read when I was getting the launch dates earlier on today, and they haven't announced their car launch dates. They've said it's something like the season launch or team launch or something, which just says to me they're going to wheel out last year's car with basically the same livery on it and
slightly different sponsors based on the contracts.
So
I can tell you right now, I won't be watching any of the team launches. What I will, well, actually, no, I'll have to because we do this. But to
be fair, the Ferrari one was really good last year.
I'll probably watch the highlights of them on YouTube. Is what I'll watch.
Yeah, I'll just wait for the photos to get leaked.
Yeah, see the photos because I'm really only interested in what the cars look like. I don't really care about all the flim flam they have to say about it. Like you're a Formula One team. You've made a race car. You're going to go racing. You can say anything else. You can talk about your brand. You can mention all the sponsors. You can do all that other stuff. But I'm not really here for that. I'm here to see what your car looks like, see what color it is, and watch it go fast against other cars. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. There were a couple of scenes last year that basically were just like, there it is. There's the new car. Nice one. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, cool.
Perfect.
Do that.
Perfect. Yeah. The Northern in me loves that. No nonsense. Just wheel the car out, send it testing, see some lap times. How quick is it? Great. Get an idea of what it's going to be like. Hopefully you can make it better for the season proper when we actually go racing.
Yep. Next from Max, who says, "Hey man, is this year the year? Ferrari back, Mercedes back, McLaren back, Red Bull livery change, Alonso win, Norris win."
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
It would. Ferrari back, maybe.
I'd take like 2 of that list and be relatively happy.
Of Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren, I've probably got most faith in McLaren, I think, currently, to be competing, at least from the start of the season.
There's been some big talk coming out of Mercedes, I've noticed.
There has. Like you were saying a little bit ago about, teams coming in, shaking things up and not necessarily just following the mould, which is all well and good. But then when I read Mercedes saying we've basically changed almost every part on the car, I'm just like, oh God, no, here we go again. They're just
that's Red Bull did the same thing last year. There were barely any components the same because they made everything lighter, which is why it was such a good car. And all the other teams, whilst changing the aerodynamic surfaces and all that kind of stuff, will be making every component of their car lighter, and that is the thing that is going to bring all the teams together. Because there is still a difference with the less good teams and the really good teams. Like the really, really good teams have are way under the weight limit and it can move ballast around and things like that. And that's a huge factor in any race car. You need to be able to move the ballast around. And if you have very little to move around, you can't really affect the performance of the car as much. So I think that is going to be key for a lot of teams this year, making the cars much, much lighter, allowing them to, really focus the tyre wear. It really affects your tyre wear, obviously, the weight distribution of the car. And if a few more teams can get on top of their heavyweight cars, then I think that will make things a lot easier for them to get closer to Red Bull and give them more opportunity. A lot of teams complain about not being able to get their cars into the window, and a lot of that I think is often to do with weight of car and weight distribution and tyre wear, obviously. So the lighter you can make it, the better.
The sport really needs a more competitive season this year.
Yeah,
for sure.
It was rubbish last year. I'm not afraid to say it. Across Formula One, and it's not without being too meta, but across Formula One social and across Formula One as a content creation kind of scene, I think everyone's suffered a little bit. Just from it being not that interesting across the season. You've got your hardcore who'll kill me, vilify me for saying something like that, but I do think it needs to be better next year.
Yeah, there's always interesting stuff going on to look for, but when you're having to go looking for that every week, then that's not ideal.
It really needs to write itself the way it did in 2021.
The thing with it is you can look down the grid and find entertainment at each race last season, 100%. But in the grand scheme of things, there is the element that you should be seeing that entertainment at the front of the grid.
Exactly.
There's so many eras that we. Well, yeah, it should be anywhere, but yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of eras in my lifetime watching Formula One where you basically don't see the leader, and unfortunately, last season was part of one of those eras. There were times when you just did not see Schumacher for vast majority of races, and you were just watching whoever else was battling somewhere down the pack, and it was still entertaining, but you knew the season was a foregone conclusion, and this got like that very quickly.
Well, in those days, you weren't even watching action down the grid because none of them could overtake each other. So you were just watching cars going around a track, pretty much, which is where the old, expression comes from. Whenever you tell someone who isn't into Formula One fan, isn't a Formula One fan, say, "Oh, I'm a Formula One fan," they're like, "What? It's just cars going around a track." It's like, no, it's not. It's so much more than that. Well, it should be.
It's if you think back to 2021 and the amount of midfield stuff that we just didn't see because they were focused on Hamilton and Verstappen the whole time. It's looking back, what a nice problem to have that was.
Yeah.
I mean Hamilton-Rosberg era as well. Don't get me wrong, it was a very Mercedes-dominated era, but at least they were at each other, and it gave us entertainment at the front, and that's kind of what you. And I think last season would have been a little different had Checo managed to take the fight to Max, Rosberg took the fight to Hamilton in that part of that era, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, is what it is.
Okay, final question from Paul D. Hey man, do you think the McLaren's new "whatever it takes" slogan means that they think they'll be back to fighting for wins, or will it get buried when their car is terrible at the start of the season? Hopefully,
it's kind of bullish of them. They're teasing all this. Basically, they're teasing the livery launch and the car launch, but doing a whole social media campaign about it. And the video they released today was basically all about last season and how terribly they started, and then how hard they worked to turn it around. So to be kind of resurrecting that spectre from the start of last season, they clearly think they're not going to have similar problems this year.
Whatever it takes to me is just some creative came up with it, and ad agency passed it on to them. That's your season launch.
Yeah,
call me bitter, but that's
no. It is, but the fact that they are making a point of basically saying, look how terrible we were this time last year. It would be a bad look if they then started this year just as bad. It'd be like, well, why did you bring that up again, sort of thing. But
yeah,
I've got faith in them this year. I think the speed they turned things around last year and how close they did get to the front. I mean, they were the second fastest car for most of the second half of the season. So, yeah, I've got faith. I don't know if they're going to be challenging for wins from the start. I still, unfortunately, think Red Bull are going to be a very difficult team to beat this year.
Especially if they're pooling their resources, they're going to be, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if McLaren started the season as the second fastest team.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, what you really want is we want 2021 again, don't we? We want, I mean, not all elements of it, but you really want a close fight between.
Yeah,
I mean, if you can get a close fight between more than two drivers from maybe 2-3 different teams, or maybe maybe if it is just like 4 drivers from 2 teams, I'd take that. I'd take 2 drivers from 2 teams. I would love sort of 3 or 4 drivers from maybe 3 or 4 different teams. That's the dream. That's what all the rule changes are aimed at. That's what all of the budget cap is aimed at. The aero restrictions, all that stuff is aimed at bringing that sort of that spectrum of performance down and down and down and down, so that the driver can be the difference between the cars. So
we wanted 2012 again, basically.
Yeah, 2012 was rad, man. Like, I remember Bahrain, there were like 7 cars fighting for the lead over the first like 12 laps.
Yeah.
Like, it was just so crazy.
7 wins in the first 7 races.
Yes.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
That would be lovely.
We can dream.
We can dream. Shall we leave it there?
Yeah, on that dream, I'll wrap us up for this week. So thanks to everyone who's joined us. Thanks particularly to the patrons from the Discord who have joined us live. If you want to find out more about getting involved with that, head to patreon.com/Back of the Grid. If you want to reach out to us on socials, just search for Back of the Grid on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We'll appear on all of those. And you can head to the website, which is backofthegrid.com, where there's a contact us form if you want to do that method of contact. That is it for this week. Yeah, so we are still working on the quiz. Am I right, Chris?
No.
Oh, scrap that bit then.
Yeah. The quiz ended up being a Patreon exclusive thing, so we'll cut that bit.
Okay.
Make a note somewhere.
Yeah. So, all right, then I'll do something else then. So we're still working on the content schedule for the pre-season and what that looks like. So we will let you all know in due course what that is. Without fail, we will be back during the car launch weeks in early February. But as we get more plans in place, we will let you know a bit of a more firm schedule of when we intend to have some episodes up and what the rough topics of those will be. So keep an eye on those socials if you want to find out more about that. Yeah, that is it from us. So we will see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Outro music.
Doesn't want to work. I have clicked it. It's just spinning. Doesn't want to work, sadly.
Professional as ever.